سيدنا محمد أشرف الخلق وسيد المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Before we get started, as we always request, we ask just the brothers to come more forward, come so that you could be in halaqah. The guys all the way in the back there, love you guys to be close. Guys in the back corner, Assalamu alaikum. Come forward, come closer guys. Everyone, unless you have like back issues or like knee problems and you need to stay on the wall, you can stay on the wall. MashaAllah, most of the people are very healthy, MashaAllah. Barakallah feekum. Inshallah, we'll start off with a brief dua and then we'll get started with our program. Allahumma laka alhamdu hatta tarda wa laka alhamdu ma radit wa laka alhamdu ba'da rida hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fih. Allahumma salli wa sallim wa barik ala sayyidina wa nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. اللهم ربنا وفقنا لطاعتك وذكرك وشكرك وحسن عبادتك. اللهم استعملنا في الخير وللخير واجعلنا من أهل الخير. اللهم ارزقنا الفهم عنك والبصيرة في أمرك والنفاذ في طاعتك. اللهم ثبتنا بالقول الثابت في الحياة الدنيا وفي الآخرة. اللهم اغفر لنا ولوالدينا ولوالد والدينا ولأبنائنا وبناتنا وإخواننا وأخواتنا والمسلمين والمسلمات عامة يا أرحم الراحمين. Oh Allah, we ask you to forgive us in this moment, all of us. Forgive us and our parents and our children and our grandparents and our families and our community and everyone from the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Oh Allah, we ask you to guide us to your pleasure and to make us a people of goodness and to use us for goodness and to grant us your goodness. Oh Allah, we ask you to make us a people of goodness and to grant us your goodness and to make us of those who bring goodness wherever we go. Make this masjid and this space a place of knowledge, a place of activism, a place of worship, and make everything that we do sincerely for your sake accepted by you and bring us closer to you with every passing day of our lives. Allahumma ameen, Allahumma ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Today I have my dear brother Ahmed Jad, and we're going to have a discussion together about what this whole program's about. It's the Friday Forum, not the Community Hub. Is there a difference? What is it? Setting the vision for this program and hopefully what to expect and I guess you could say the type of topics and the type of methodology we'll be implementing from week to week, inshaAllah. So inshaAllah, I'll pass it over to him to get us started and we'll take it from there.
Jazakallah khair, Shaykh. So to get started, I think before we get to what it is, we know that one thing it's going to be is interactive. So one of the things we do want to have, tell me if it's too loud, by the way, if it's coming out too loud, but please text questions about the topic as it's coming to the number. But one thing we want to add is also feel free to answer some of the questions that I'm asking the Shaykh yourself. And we'll try to bring it up if we can, if it works out, so we can kind of have the Shaykh go back and forth on some of your responses as well. So again, we're trying to keep this interactive.
The sound. Maybe try to keep it away. See if that works.
Is it better here?
That one has an echo.
I think it's better here, right?
Yeah.
This is good here? All right, I'll just keep it from here. And again, keeping it interactive, one of the reasons we're having this back and forth discussion is, again, I'm not a scholar, I'm just one of the members of the community like yourselves. So the idea is Shaykh is generous in trying to build a bridge here with the community, so there is a closeness between the community and us. So between you guys answering questions, asking questions, between me trying to represent you guys and asking questions as well, the Shaykh is taking steps so we can feel that we have a closeness with the scholars and we're getting the scholarship with the community. So I was going to start the question, but I guess I'll just wait a second. Shaykh, to start
I guess we have no choice this time. Use the echo one.
It's getting too weird.
Keeps on whistling.
Hello? Yeah, this is better. Okay, so Shaykh, to get things started,
Go ahead, you're good to go. Talk.
All right, to get things started, I think we want to start by defining what is the Friday Forum and why are we doing it?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Rasulullah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa ala. What's the Friday Forum? Well, I guess, we took some time trying to think of the name. I hope we picked a name that sort of suits the idea of what the program's about. Forum is a place where you exchange ideas, where you interact, where there is a critical engagement happening between multiple individuals, not a lecture. And I guess that's one of the centerpieces of what we're hoping this program will be. We want it to be interactive. We want there to be a healthy back and forth between maybe perhaps if there's multiple speakers, or like you and I today, and then also with not those speakers, also with everyone here, because I think it's really important for everyone to be able to express themselves on one end and to be able to hear how other people think. I think that's really important, Akhi Ahmed, because Allah created us with unique minds. Each person has a unique set of experiences and a unique outlook. And I think that when discussions happen, fruitful discussions happen, people grow, because when I talk, I just have my own set of experiences and my own exposure. But when I'm able to see how other people perceive things, it just gives a whole other twist to it. That's why they actually say when you're seeking knowledge and you're trying to learn, there's two journeys of learning. The first journey is when you're learning for yourself as a student. There's another journey of learning as a teacher, because when you're a teacher, you get exposed to something that you'll never understand as a student. You get exposed to, do we have any teachers here, by the way? Anyone who's a teacher by profession? Anyone? We have one teacher, two teachers. We have a few teachers, 3, 4, mashallah. I think they'll be able to attest to this. That when you're learning, it's just you, your mind, and the information, right? But when you're teaching, no, it's a whole other ball game. You got to deal with a classroom full of different minds. Some of them learn, through example. Some of them learn through question and answer, and some of them learn other ways. Some of them, get it from the first time around, and some of them need it repeated. So anyway, the whole idea here is Allah created us with different minds and unique experiences for a reason. And I think that's what I'm hoping we'll get out of this type of discussion. Allahu A'lam.
So one of the things that we're looking at here is that you are actually yourself looking for feedback from the community to be able to see how they're thinking about things and how to enrich the discussion and the learning for them in that way, in that back and forth.
Absolutely.
Okay. How does this differ from the Community Hub, which I'm guessing most of the people here are familiar with, but if you were not familiar, it was the other Friday night event that we're having consistently before Ramadan. So why the change? What's the difference here?
Why the change? Why the difference? Community Hub has been around for a while, actually from the beginning of the masjid. Since this masjid opened up, perhaps 2 months in, or 3 months in, that's when we started the Community Hub. By the way, this month, actually just a few days ago, the masjid had its anniversary. It completed its 6th year. The masjid opened its doors on June 3rd, 2016. June 3rd, 2016. Now what's today? June 10? 10? Yeah, June 10. So now we're in the 7th year of this masjid. Alhamdulillah. So anyway, so the Community Hub's been around for a while, and I guess it was targeting more of like the family crowd, parents with their children. This program, we're hoping for something different. We're hoping, during Ramadan we had a unique experience. How many of you came to our i'tikafs during Ramadan? Any of you guys here? Few of you? So during the i'tikafs, we found that there was a big interest in try to keep it quiet, please. Jazakumullah khair. During the Ramadan, we were having discussion format, discussion-based i'tikafs with our Saturday night talks. And we found that a lot of people, and with our meeting point, and the meeting point was Friday, meeting point, outside of Ramadan, that was kind of like a monthly thing. We found people really interested in the discussion format, like sort of the back and forth, and being able to ask questions and give their feedback to things. And people actually asked, when is it going to happen again? So, I guess we put some thought into it and be like, if we could tap into a demographic that's sort of flocked away from the masjid. That demographic is young adults, young professionals, people in colleges, people starting off their life, their careers, people newly married, or people new to having children, or people still in that journey of growth through life. It's a wide range, maybe you could say 20s, 30s, 40s. This is that range, I guess you could say that is the target audience. If you're not in that range, don't feel guilty because still the content, 50 is good. Some people, there's something funny. There's some people who are now in their 50s, 60s, 70s, but they have the energy of people in their 20s. Someone recently, one of the brothers in our community is a little older. He was giving a bear hug to another brother. And the brother was like, ugh. He was like crying, wincing from pain because the hug was pretty strong. The brother was like in his early 30s. So he was like, what? You're feeling pain already? So I joked back with him and I said, our generation, we reach Shaykhuha at the age of 30. So, differences in generation. You know what Shaykhuha is, right? Old age. We reach old age at 30. Yeah.
So we did try to start this interactive format kind of in the community hub, but it seems like we're going to try and take that step further and try to make that even stronger.
Yeah.
But the second part is this demographic change. In other words, we're trying to keep this audience focused for the, as you say, 20s to the 40s. I think one of the things important to keep in mind here is this Friday night, inshallah, we'll be playing. If you are in your 20s and 30s, this is the place that you should be, inshallah, on Friday night. It'll be the right audience for you.
So officially 20 to 50s, and when you ask one of the coming questions, I'll tell you guys why. 20 to 50.
Okay. Yeah, and one of the things, again, that you can't get from these kinds, I know, and we'll talk about this too, I know I have this habit sometimes, I can't help but see there's an event happening at the masjid, and I'm like, this seems great, but I think I'm just going to watch the YouTube repeat later, right?
Yeah.
And not show up. And one of the things about this is that you can actually get to interact and be part of it where you couldn't otherwise. So you can't just watch this on YouTube and get the same effect, right? So you actually have to come here to get the full experience of it. So I think you touched upon one of the reasons why you were targeting this group. One of them is that this group seems to be farther away from the masjid. Or I forgot the phrasing you said. They're drifting. I don't know what the phrasing you said. It's something like that about the masjid. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I guess, one of the ideas we had, like we said, is we want this to be interactive. So now, I guess with this question you're asking me, I think it would be good if you guys want to start sharing your own feedback for any of these questions that already passed. You could do that at this number, by the way. And if this question specifically, and I'll repeat it again, do you think that this age graphic, this demographic, 20 to 50, drifts away, tends to drift away from the masjid or not? I personally feel the answer to that is in many cases yes. Of course, it's not a categorical thing. But this demographic tends to drift away. In fact, ICPC, we used to have a young adults committee, but I guess for the past several years it's been dysfunctional, inactive, and it's because it's not easy. Especially in today's world, to keep people interested in coming to a physical space. I think I was talking about this, you just touched upon it right now, in one of my recent khutab. People, have got so programmed to, be in like a virtual reality and communicate through gadgets and through other means that, I guess dealing on a human level is becoming a little bit awkward for a lot of people. Don't call me, text me, or, we'll meet through Zoom instead of meeting in person, especially with the pandemic and everything that happened. We'll meet through Zoom, or I'll just do FaceTime. Why waste the time of driving to here or there? Well, I could just do it while I'm sitting in my own room. I don't even want to go to work anymore. And a lot of companies are starting to like this. I don't want to go to work anymore. Why? I could work from home, right? I'll just do everything from, I don't even want to go pick up my own food. I'll just sit home and Grubhub or Uber Eats or
Amazon, you can order your
what is
entire
it?
life. Amazon, you can order your whole life.
Whole Foods, ومش عارف ايه. Don't even leave your house to get food. It's going to come right to your doorstep, right? And everything's starting to become like that, you know.
Right.
So, and you know what? One of the things, and you know what? Video games aren't even how they used to be. You know, video games in the past, you know, you got a joystick or you got the remote control. You gotta try to like insert yourself in the reality. Now with these things that they put on their heads, you become part of a virtual reality. And very strange. Some of these video games, you create your own alternate reality. It's a real thing. People create. There's shu'uban wa qaba'il. I forgot what's the game called, but there's this game that you make tribes and clans, and you could become part of someone's clan, or
these new age games now.
yeah. Anyway, you know, Clash of Clans, is that what it's called? There you go. So it's a new definition of shu'uban wa qaba'il, tribes and nations, in a virtual sense, you know. So. And you know what? That really decimates a really critical aspect of our humanity. If I no longer function with dealing with people, you know, directly, it could, you know, it takes a toll on people's social skills. And you know what? So anyway, just getting back to your question. What was your question again, by the way? Do you remember what your question?
Yeah, I remember that. I think it was about why the 20s through the about I guess expanding on the 20s to the 40s about this demographic drifting away from the masjid. I think you were touching upon. Well, I think your answer is getting to a good point, which is there's a lot of reasons, but one of it is this new technological age we're living in, plus post-COVID world, is we're drifting apart in all aspects of life. I think not in the masjid, right? And I think that probably needs so much of how to deal with that with this new age. But I mean, it's simple. So for example, for me with Amazon, I love using Amazon for everything that I can. Yeah, I mean, if I can get it as cheap as I could in the store, or cheaper, I would rather that than go to the store personally. Work, and I know a lot of people this at work, if I can get away with never going to my work office again, I'm going to try, right? And I think a lot of people have that attitude as well. What's the negative of doing, but I think some areas that could be okay, right? So I can get my work done just as well, for example, and I think I can get my groceries just as good if the price is just the same. I don't need to interact with those people. What's the harm in trying to get my learning through just digital means? I can stop afterwards. I can pause. For example, me, I personally have a very hard time now almost listening to a real person talk at their normal speed because I'm so used to putting everyone on speed 1.5 at least, right? No, it's it, 'cause some people might like it a little slower. The point is you can customize everything to your perfect way. So in some ways it seems like it's a positive, but what could be the negatives then of doing your whole deen through a virtual format?
Yeah, so absolutely, don't get me wrong. These things, by the way, are positive, very positive.
In some
you know, in some senses, exactly. Like I think Amazon's amazing, not to its workers, but I mean like, yani, amazing, you know, in terms of the accessibility it gives you. Right. You know, so you could definitely make use of this and enjoy those things. But now, am I really, you know, maintaining that aspect of my humanity that's critical, the social skills, the relationships, the support system that every one of us needs? No matter, you know, some people might, I don't need anyone to support. Some people have that attitude, you know, they have this like, I'm this hard-nosed person, I don't need anybody, I can figure everything out by myself, I don't need a support system, you know, that's for weak people. And that's not true, it's not true. The Prophet ﷺ himself needed a support system. You know what happened when he lost that support system? It was called what? You guys, what was it called? Am al-Huzn. It was called the year of sorrow. The year of sorrow when the Prophet ﷺ lost his support system, right? So we all need that. And you know, it's part of, like one of my recent khutab, you could find it on our YouTube page, by the way. It's called Isolation is Ruining Society. You know, something gets lost inside when everything becomes about just information. People start losing empathy. You know how awful it is when someone has no empathy? Well, you know what? Some of you might know the answer to that because you might know a family member who has no empathy. It might be a mother or a father. It might be a sibling. Absolutely no empathy. Only like having a very narcissistic worldview. Everything centered on who I am and what I want. And it's a scary thing. You know, it's a really scary thing when people start treating others like statistics. That's when you get people, sometimes it happens to people who read the news a lot, because you start hearing about atrocity after atrocity, happening wherever it is. Oh, only 50 people died, that's not really that bad, 50 people, I've heard of more,
Because you don't even see the real people.
Yeah,
You don't
yeah,
even see
yeah,
them as real anymore.
yeah. And you know what? That isolation makes a brutal human being, a violent human, especially when everything that they do in their private time is about what? Is about, all right, if I'm going to win in this game, I need to kill the most people. All right, or if I'm going to watch a movie and I'm going to watch something that's all about murder, right? Something that's very sinister, something evil, vile. It's a whole, or if I want something to make me laugh. The the comedy industry is all centered on what? If you want to laugh, it needs to be on the expense of others. You got to make fun of other people. You got to criticize. You got to put down. You got to do this, and that. That's funny to people, right? Like America's Funniest Home Videos, right? It's funny to see people fall and break their backs and, hurt themselves real bad. They even have these, if you go to YouTube and you see some of these things, like for example, car crashes, fatal car crashes, you go look that up, or crazy car crashes, you go look it up, you'll find like a bazillion videos on it, and each one of them has a few million views. Why? It's brutal, violence, and that violence comes out sometimes in people's conflicts. You know what? You step on my toe, I'm going to make dua against you. Not just you, I'm going to make dua against your parents, your children. I'm going to wait to see you fail. I can't wait to see you in such pain and misery. A'udhu billah. That's the type of person that happens to someone who has no social skills. Someone who has no empathy, no mercy in their heart. Well, sorry, it's a long answer, but
so, it highlights it highlights the degree to which we think that this virtual world is harmless. But you're saying that when this isolation can make you lose all sense of humanity, and it's very abnormal. It's against the norm. So we're living in a very unusual time, right? 'Cause there's never been a time in history that's been like that. Is there a particular question you want to get into? But yeah, so.
So we got some comments here actually. So here,
read through them? You
yeah,
can do
sure,
yourself, whatever you
sure,
like.
sure. You could read through them.
No, I was gonna say you could do it if you like. I hope I didn't mark it already.
It's asking for Face ID. I don't even have to put the passcode anymore. Allahu Akbar. Talk about convenience.
Yeah, well, someone makes a good point that they don't think it's that people are drifting away from the masjid, but it's just that there's so much information out there. And I guess I'll phrase there's so many options out there that there's a big competition for attention. I wonder if you want to comment on that point.
Yeah, sure. When they define knowledge, so what is knowledge to you guys? Like, if someone was to ask you that question, any takers for this question? When someone says knowledge, what does that mean to you? Go ahead. In English. Huh? Okay. What does knowledge mean to someone who could talk English? You could talk English, I'm a sheikh. Share your opinion. Something you could make use of. Okay? When you hear the word knowledge, what does it bring to your mind? What does it bring to your mind? Wisdom? Information? Wisdom, things you could make use of. Understanding your surroundings. Okay. Okay, share one thing. Just so everyone could share something. Experience. You guys shared a few things, but here's how one of the worst ways you could define knowledge. Limiting it to just information. And that's the problem in the virtual reality. When people just get their deen from online sources and they treat knowledge just like information, it leads to horrific results. Because if it's just information, then I'm going to lose the spirit of it. Okay, as long as this doesn't say haram next to it, that means I could go ahead and do it, right? That's it. That means it's completely okay to do because it's not haram, right? So when they describe knowledge, they say there's ilm zahir and then there's ilm batin. There is an outer shell of knowledge. That's okay. This is how you pray. This is how you fast. This is how you give zakah. And these are the procedural things, the things on the outside, the information aspect. But then the crux of knowledge and the core of knowledge is what they refer to as ilm batin. And of course, this term could be misunderstood, but this is the internal sense or the spirit of what knowledge is about. When Allah says, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء, indeed those who are conscious of Allah most are the scholars, the people of knowledge. If someone understands this verse as information, then of course they're going to walk away with a complete misunderstanding. Because not everyone who has a lot of information is necessarily a good person. Well, there's too many cases of people who, can run laps around everyone around them. They might even be a person of knowledge and a teacher themselves, but at their core, they don't really have the internal sense of what knowledge is about. That's something very spiritual. That's something relating to character. That's something relating to behavior. That's another sense of knowledge. And the reason why I'm saying this is, you will never get that without something called suhbah, companionship, right? They say al-akhlaqu mu'diya, character is contagious. You could sit in front of the screen watching YouTube video after YouTube video. There is a certain thing that will be lost upon you if you don't sit around good people. If you don't learn from good people directly, face to face. One of the statements of Sayyidina Luqman is reported in Muwatta Imam Malik. He says to his son, one of the advices of Luqman to his son, he says, Ya bunay, jalis al-ulama wa zahimhum. Oh my son, sit with people of knowledge, true knowledge, right? Not just information. No, forget about information, everyone could get it online, right? But companionship, that's what made the Sahaba special. Because they were in the company of the Prophet ﷺ, they learned from his behavior. If you could find someone who's a good person to be around and learn from and emulate that and be under the tutelage of, or I guess have a mentor in your life, an advisor, just a good person, someone who's a good friend and a good companion, that's something that can never ever be replaced by any virtual thing. So what was the statement there by Luqman? What did he say? He said, "O my son, sit with people of true knowledge and sit closely to them, because Allah revives the hearts with the light of wisdom, the nur of wisdom, just like He revives the earth with the rains that descend from the heaven above." Yeah, so anyway, that's how I would comment on that one.
I was going to actually ask if we can ask examples from the Sunnah about the idea of isolation versus not, but it was going to be even hard to even ask the question, because there's no such thing as isolation, I think, back then, because you couldn't survive on your own in the first place. That's one thing, right? You needed a community to survive to get all your basic essentials. But I mean, there's one example here of the idea of Luqman saying that you should be sitting with the people and be close to that companionship. So I guess I think on the point.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Like, I think isolation in the short term is really convenient, quote unquote. Of course, in the long term, it messes people up. Isolation, it messes people up. It's the main reason why people today, they have a lot of mental health issues. They don't talk with good people. They don't have a good surroundings around them. So in the short term, it's really convenient though, because hey, why would I want to deal with people? People tend to be really difficult. A lot of people tell themselves that. People tend to be difficult. Why on earth would I want that difficulty in my life? Why should I give myself a headache? Deal with since this is supposed to be targeting that demographic, some young people were saying, well, why deal with my father? Why deal with my mother? I dread having to sit in the same room as them. I don't want to have anything to do with my siblings. They're annoying. They're just annoying. And that feeling, that sense that people have towards others, you know what? It's not easy to deal with people. But in the end of the day, that's what the message of the prophets was really all about. That's how a person's faith is truly shown, in dealing with people. When I'm alone, I could be the best person. You know what? When I go to the masjid and go there for 5, 10, 15 minutes and say salam to people, the funniest thing in the world, right? When brothers send salam to each other at the masjid and they hardly know anything about it, it's a nice gesture. I'm not saying it's bad, it's good. Oh, how are you, brother? Shake hands, we hug. Oh, I love you for the sake of Allah. Even though I hardly know your name and I know nothing about you, everyone could do it. You know what? You could be sitting next to a serial killer. And I'm just kidding. No, I don't think there. You could be sitting next to a real mujrim and not knowing anything about him, and he seems like a nice guy. But when you see him at home, woof, and when you see her at home, woof, a completely different person, right? So that's where dealings make a difference. The dealing with people, yeah, it's not easy, but it's what really makes me better. It's what really helps me improve. If I'm sincere, if I don't want to improve and I'm like, the hell with everybody and everything, but then I'm just choosing misery for myself. You know how many people choose misery for themselves, Akhi Ahmed? A lot of people choose misery for themselves. May Allah not make us from them. Ya Rabb.
Okay. So I think on the point of isolation, I think that covers one of the reasons that that this group might be drifting away from the masjid. I think the person who brought this up brings up a good point. That there's multiple reasons why. So I think one of them could be the fact that they could just be isolating more because of this time that we live in, or X, Y, or Z reasons. I wonder if we could talk about some other reasons as well. I guess first let's see if we want to get into this one comment from someone. Someone just made a good comment. I guess it's good to share that someone during this Ramadan, they describe themselves as having repented, so they're becoming closer to Islam, and this forum is perfect for someone like them. So someone who's trying to come closer to Islam, they're saying that they feel like being in a forum like this is good. Starting that social interaction is good for them. So that's one example of why it could be good for people. Especially for people you don't have much of a Muslim community in the past and you're trying to take steps in the direction, coming to the masjid is a great place to do that, right? There are other reasons why people might not be coming to the masjid. So first let's talk about this demographic maybe a little bit more. So it's between the 20s to the 40s. I guess just to get some clarity, personally I can't help but look at them as a very different demographic. Why group this demographic together? I think maybe you'll touch on the 50-year-old thing you wanted to mention too, I guess.
Jazakallah khair for asking the question. I guess this is really important to reflect on. If we were all here to try to break down the demographics of life, in terms of numbers, not in terms of anything else, age, how would you break it down? What would be the first one? What's the first one? Don't put a number for me, just what would you call it? What is it? Childhood? Childhood, right? Infancy, whatever it is, all together, grouped together in childhood, right? In Arabic, this is the first marhala min marahil al-haya. They call it tufula, right? Or siba. They call it the age childhood. This is the first bracket. And then after that, you got marhalat al-shabab, right? They call it, in Fusha, they call it futuwa. So you have siba or tufula, and then you have futuwa, right? The futuwa is marhalat al-shabab, the age of youth. What's the age of youth? What's the age of youth? Well, look how they define it. Look how the scholars, they define it. It's not 12 to 18, by the way. I'm not talking about teenagers, right? The age of youth, they say, is from the age of bulugh, from the age of adolescence, until approximately the age of 30. Or some of them say 33. This is marhalat al-shabab, right? And what they mean by it is it's an age of massive taqa, high energy, age of vibrancy. Of course, you might know a lot of people who are low energy, people who are, not really active and they're 20 years old. But that's an aberrancy. That's not how it used to be, right? That's coming about because we spend 10 hours a day sitting down and we don't move around. But that's for different realities. But they say that the age of shabab and futuwa is this age of vibrancy and this age of high energy. And it's also this age of, I guess you could say, openness to ideas. Openness to ideas. That's how it should be. Of course, some of the people in the age of shabab might be the most stubborn creation that Allah ever created. You know, some parents might say this. But what makes youth, what is it?
This is again the puberty to 30 group, right?
Yeah, yeah. This is before things come along and ruin people, ruin human beings. This is supposed to be the age of openness. What's the evidence of this? Now, what's the evidence of this? There's actually a lot of evidences for this. One of them is فَمَا آمَنَ لِمُوسَى إِلَّا ذُرِّيَّةٌ مِّن قَوْمِهِ. The people who followed Musa alayhi salam were a group of young people from the people of Fir'aun. All right, look at the people of the cave. You guys know people of the cave, right? Everyone here knows the people of the cave? Raise your hand if you know the people of the cave. Ashab al-Kahf. Right? Everyone pretty much knows them, right? The people of the cave, they were also fitya. The Quran says, إِنَّهُمْ fitya. They're a group of youth, right? So, and you know what? Many of the people who believed in the Prophet ﷺ were actually from among the youth. They were from among the youth. You know what? You guys know when the Prophet ﷺ, how old was the Prophet when he carried the message? Huh? He was 40 years old. You know there was hardly any early companions who followed him who were actually older than him. Most of them were far younger than him. Some of the older companions, I'm talking about, you know, السابقون الأولون, very first days of Mecca. Very first days of Mecca, you're talking about the elders among the companions were like Abu Bakr, Umar, they were both younger than the Prophet. They were in their 30s. These are the elders, right? So a lot of the people, you know, and that tells you something about the stage. It's a stage of open-mindedness. That's what it should be. That's what makes youth unique. But when that gets mutilated and youth end up being the most stubborn and most set in their ways and most unwilling to change, then that means that's what strips youth of their unique aspect. But anyway, getting back to this point, that's this. So we said tufula, right? And then we said futuwa and marhalat al-shabab. So childhood, then youth. That's like from bulugh, which you could say at latest is 15, maybe for some 14. And then because some of these people at age 15, 14, 16, these were men and women from the companions. They were adults. They were not little kids. Now you got 30 people who are 30 years old and their mind's like the mind of a 15-year-old. That's, you know, but that's for other reasons, right? Again, we're talking about natural situation. So 30 or 33. Where did we get this 30 or 33 from, right? When Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam referred to himself, he used a different word. He said, وَكَهْلًا, or Sayyidina Yahya as well. وَكَهْلًا وَمِنَ الصَّالِحِينَ. Right? He referred to himself as a kahl. Kahl, kuhula, is the next stage, the third stage. This is, you could say, the age of young professionals. They say that, you know, this is when someone khalas done with schooling, perhaps started married life, in the age of 30, thinking of children, 33. So when Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam was lifted, بَلْ رَفَعَهُ اللَّهُ إِلَيْهِ, at the age of 33. So this kuhula starts at 33 or 30, and continues to either 40 or 50. Some of them say that. Some of them say kuhula, the age after youth, right? You can say this is adulthood. Officially is full-blown adulthood, 30 to 50, or 30 to 40, or 30 to 40. So there's differences of opinion about it. What comes after 50? What comes after 50? After 50 comes shaykhuha. Shaykhuha. So there are 4 stages. This is the Arabic breakdown. Shaykhuha. In our Arabic books, shaykhuha, this is when the person becomes a sheikh. What does sheikh mean? What does sheikh mean? Huh? Old man, right? Sheikh or sheikha, right? The old people. Old people. How many people do we have in marhalat al-shaykhuha? Raise your hand. No. It's something to be proud of. If you reached marhalat al-shaykhuha, the stage of being a shaykh or an old person, if you're 50 plus, this is an honor. If you could be in the masjid and you're 50 plus, mashallah. I pray that we can all reach old age upon la ilaha illallah, upon doing good things, you know. So anyway, that's the four stages that they break down life in. And you know, I guess that's why we chose this target, 20 to 50. Even though, like you said, it's very different.
Right.
Yeah. What do you want to say? At 40, 25.
The brain stops developing at 25. He mentions that he heard.
The brain completely develops at 25. Whose brain is this? Yeah. So they say in our deen, they say, you know, there's a certain number mentioned in the Quran. What's that number? You guys know it? It's a number referenced age. What is it? 40, right? حتى إذا بلغ أشده وبلغ 40 سنة, right? They say 40 is a very, very special age. It's in the middle of kuhula, right? This like full-blown adulthood that we're describing, the age of 40. That's when someone has a good amount of life experience. Their cognitive abilities are fully developed, plus they have a good amount of life experience, plus they have their physical strength. Or, you know, of course, this is just generalities, generalizations, you know. But so this is why the age of 40 is mentioned in the Quran. Because at this point, you know, certain realizations set in, and, you know, and the person's fully established, or should be fully established. Of course, you know, what do people have at 40 in the American, in the Western culture? What do they call it?
As far as what?
Midlife what crisis? Is it called?
Midlife crisis?
Midlife crisis. Midlife crisis. That's when the guy, as he's getting older, he wants like a special type of car, roofless cars, or they want to.
That's where he starts to realize his life is almost over, and yeah, and he starts to.
They want to be a young person again, yes. Right? Yeah. So anyway, so yeah, but I guess you can say that's why we chose 20 to 50. But you're totally right. Each stage has its own unique aspects. Someone who's still a college student is it's its own beast. It's very different than someone who is starting off their career. It's very different than someone who has kids. It's very different than someone who has teenagers, right? You know, so some people that might be with us, they're in their 40s, they might be getting ready to raise a teenager, right? That's its own beast, right? A teenager is a unique creation of Allah, especially in this time. Teenagers are unique creations of Allah. I'm not trying to put down teenagers. But anyway, what I'm trying to say is something very serious. You know, also after 50, you know, a person's like pretty much been there, done that, fully experienced things in life, getting ready for their kids to go to college if they have kids, you know, they're getting ready for retirement. You know, there's a hadith that mentions, أعمار أمتي بين الستين والسبعين. The ages of my ummah are between 60 and 70. Someone might live to 80, 90, inshallah. Rabbna barik. But, you know, at a certain age, with the gray hairs settling in and the hair line receding and all that, and the person starts, and then, you know, the knee pain and the back pain and the medications and all that other stuff, the person is reminded that, you know what, most of life is gone, a little remains. So at this stage, the person's like in the twilight of their life. You know, so that's the difference, I guess you could say, between the stages. Anyway, that was a long rant.
No, I mean, because it's important, because what are these stages? I think it's important why we're focusing on this demographic, and I think that's part of the talk tonight. Before I forget, can I just also, if you don't mind, Shaykh, give my own comment on the 25-year-old
sure.
thing? One thing to notice is that, so traditionally it's always been said scientifically that your IQ or your reasoning skills, those kinds of things, usually peak at around 18 and don't really increase much after that. And then your prefrontal cortex, your planning skills, that's the one that goes till 25 scientifically. Every year, they keep saying more and more that 25 keeps getting longer. I've heard recently it was like at 30, they're changing it. So, I mean, they're just, and I think it's a good example for a lot of how we should be careful with the science. They speak as science is supposed to be uncertain, but then they present it to you as fact. Remember that they started in the first place by saying the beauty of science is that it's uncertain. So they don't know when it peaks. But yes, it is true that this idea of the planning in the prefrontal cortex goes later. They don't know what that year is themselves. Sorry if you don't mind me just saying that.
Sure, sure.
Okay, so we have these stages between. So I guess let's focus. I guess we're going to start then on the shabab age, which is, let's just say, the 20s. The one that I think that's how you described it, right? Shabab, did I get it right?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure. So they have this vibrancy, they have this energy. What should be their role as far as in the Islamic community, as far as the masjid, that kind of thing? Then now that we know who they are, what their natural predispositions are. So what should their role be? They don't have wisdom yet. They're still learning. They're figuring things out. So what should they be trying to do?
You know, Jazakallah khair for taking it back to that point. Yeah, I guess before we close tonight, my hope was everyone here would walk away with three things, three takeaways. The first thing is understanding what this program's about and the vision we have for it and the format that we're going to be using. Right. So that's number one. Number two was describing our target audience, the demographic, and why community needs it. And I think this is what relates to your question. Why is a community so much in need of this demographic, 20s to 50s? Why do they need to be the most present in the masjid? For the sake of the community. And on the opposite side is why do people within this demographic need a good support system around them, a good sense of community around them, which is I'm hoping this program would serve at least as one contributor to that. You know, so those are the three takeaways I have. Like, and hopefully we could touch on that third point before we close. Is like, all right, you know what? I'm here. You know, why do I need to be here? You know, why do I need something like this in my life? You know, about that second thing though, like you said, is what's their role in community? You know, I guess, you know, one of the critical things here, like the brunt of, you know, masjid work, volunteer work, community building, needs two things. It needs wisdom and experience on one end, and it also needs, you know, a willingness, drive, an eagerness, a thirst to work. During the Prophet ﷺ's time, this demographic had that most. It had the thirst, and it had the willingness and the drive, right? And I think if catered to in the right way, a lot of things could change for the better in communities if the people at the forefront were people who had that vibrancy of youth. But it needs to be coupled with the wisdom of old age, right? So you know this. You know, there's a lot of challenges that we have when it comes to generational gaps, right? You want to say something? Jazakallah khair, barakallah feek. Did everyone hear what he said before you comment? Did everyone hear what he said? Everyone?
I can just give like a 2-second summary. You can
Sure,
give a broader
go
one
ahead.
if you want. I mean, I think the root of it is, and it's going to be a little oversimplified, I'm sorry, but generally speaking, that one of the barriers in wanting to come and be a participant and active in the masjid in the Muslim community is a lack of opportunity to get knowledge. Is that wrong?
I would
I think
say,
it's right.
is the masjid relevant to my needs? Is the masjid catering to my needs?
That's
Do
my
I
next
feel
question.
like the space of the community fills a relevant space in my life? That's one of the things that could really create a sense of urgency. I think that's the whole problem here. You know, when someone feels complacent and they feel like there's nothing like really pushing them. I gotta move right now. I gotta move right now. It causes things to get delayed, and it causes talent to be lost. How many of you would agree with what's your name? Yusuf. How many of you would agree with Brother Yusuf and what he said? Raise your hand if you agree with what he said. Where that, like, one of the reasons and the factors is many people don't feel like the masjid or the community space is catering to the needs of the demographic. Yeah. So I saw a lot of people raise their hand, and you know, I definitely see what you're saying. I think it's one factor among many, right? Building that sense of urgency is something that we all really need to think about. You know, the companions had it really good. The companions were, they had that strong sense of urgency as a, I'm going to get to Hajj inshallah, 1 second. They had a strong sense of urgency as a generation. That's why they did great things, right? And that's why they said something like, how many of you guys have heard this statement before? If you wake up in the morning, then what? Then don't expect what? Then don't expect to live until nightfall. And if you see nightfall, then don't expect what? To see daybreak, right? Don't expect. This is what we saw say, qisar al-amal. Don't leave the work of today until tomorrow. Because tomorrow is going to have its own set of responsibilities and duties and tasks, right? You might never get to it. So how do I build this sense of urgency? You know, first it needs to see, like, you know, people, we have this, you know, it's not really selfishness, to be honest with you, but we have this, like, what's in it for me type of attitude towards things, right? Like, okay, well, why should I invest in this? What am I going to get out of it? Why should I be friends with fulan or fulana? What am I going to really get out of that, right? We all think in this type of manner where it's just like this sort of transactional attitude towards things. That's good. But also it could be bad, because that means when things go south and I'm not benefiting, I might stop doing the work, and that could be a problem, because, you know, like, say, and this happens sometimes. Like, sometimes it happens like to a person in my position, where, like, okay, if the people in front of me were only like 2 people, I might lose a lot of steam and energy, because I might feed off the energy of a crowd. 2 people is very different than 100 people, right? Or 1,000 people. That might give me some energy. That's why Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, and what he did was so amazing. You guys, are you guys following along with me? What was one of the most amazing things about what Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam did? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Go ahead. He was patient, yes, that's true. You know, and he made da'wah for 950 years. But something more than that. All right, it's, you know, it's one thing to be patient and then have amazing results in the end, right? Like, just make it through, push through. Like, if how many of you guys like basketball today? How many of you guys like basketball? Hardly anyone. That's why you guys are here. Because if you liked basketball, you would not be here. You would be watching the basketball game because it's on right now, right? Yeah.
Tonight?
Yes, yes. So, so anyway, that basketball reference is, what am I trying to say here? You know, people, I lost my chain of thought. What was the last thing I said before basketball? Huh? Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, right? What was so special about what he did besides being patient for 950 years in da'wah? You want to say something? Okay, That's on his part. He stayed true to himself, just like every prophet, right? Every prophet had to be patient, and every prophet had to be true to himself. There was something so difficult about his circumstance. Any sisters want to share something? You could share something if you'd like. Anyone? Go ahead. Huh? About his son. That's true. That's true. His son didn't believe in him. Yeah? And other prophets had to deal with something similar too. Something more than this. How many followers did Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam have? You know? In the dozens, right? Or they weren't in the thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands, right? That's, for an average person, that's really depressing. I'm not going to think about 900 years. Forget about 900 years. I'm going to try for an entire year to win people over and build, like I'm going to try to build something nice. And in the end of the day, I'm only going to walk away with 5 or 10 people. Oh my God, that's depressing. All these efforts, and it's like, you know, telemarketers, right? Telemarketers. Anyone here a telemarketer? Alhamdulillah. You know, they say, you know, I'm serious. It's a serious thing. Sometimes telemarketers need therapy. Sometimes they get, you know, depressed because, you know, if you're calling people and, you know, I don't know why on earth someone would want to be a telemarketer, but like if you're calling people, hey, what do you think about this? And then shut the phone in your face, and then next person does the same thing, and then like perhaps out of every 100 people you get someone who's willing to talk to you for a minute and then says, I'm not interested. It's depressing. It is extremely depressing. But, you know, so anyway, the reason why we got to that point was, you know, the whole sense of urgency thing. You know, sometimes if I don't feel like in a transactional relationship, what does transactional relationship mean, right? What does it mean? I'm in a tijara, there's a give and take. I'm giving this, I should get something back. If I'm not getting something back, that means I'm going to feel what? I'm going to, you know what, Allah knows that how we are. You know, what does the Quran say? You know, هل أدلكم على تجارة تنجيكم من عذاب أليم. Allah knows human nature. Human beings, if they're going to do something, the most thing that's going to motivate them is if they're going to get something in return. But people who are at a higher level of commitment, even if I'm not going to get something back, I'm still going to do the work. Because I'm doing it for something greater. I'm not doing it for something you could give me. Right? But anyway, that was, you know, tangent about, but, you know, totally, what you're saying is absolutely right. You know, when you have communities that sort of just like throw this whole demographic, 20, 30, 40, 50 on the back burner, it's an atrocity. It's an atrocity. You know what's so sad? If a community keeps on talking about the youth, we need to care about the youth, not realizing that some of their quote-unquote youth have reached the age of 40 and 50. They're no longer youth anymore, right? You like sort of like skip a generation. You have, anyway, I don't want to talk too much. We're on live stream, so we're on Facebook and YouTube right now, so I'll just leave the rest for later. You wanted to say something earlier. You want to repeat what he said?
Yeah, he's talking about, and actually, thank you. That was going to be my next question when there was going to be a question, kind of. So thank you on that. It's he's described about one of the things that keeps this demographic away is that they're very focused on their career. If you don't mind, can I just actually expand into the broader question? There?
Sure.
That there's the demographic. There's part of the demographic that they're just in their 20s, and the last thing they're thinking about is Islam. The last thing they're thinking about is trying to help and serve the community or something like that. There's that group, but then there's also that group in their young 20s who they are actually very active in helping the community and things like that. But then they do it for a period of time, and then it seems to be once they get a serious job and things get really, and then all of a sudden they get really focused on their career, and once they get married and that kind of thing, all of a sudden, and this, you know, we've heard this particularly in this community too, but it's, I think, a general thing. All of a sudden that seems to go away, and it's almost as if they've had this, you know, they've used this Islamic community to kind of fill their time while they're waiting for everything to develop in their life. And once things develop, they disconnect. And I think that's kind of, I mean, it's a little different, but I think it's also in the same category. Can you touch about this?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the doctor after, but inshallah, after I comment on this, we're going to go to you and then we'll come back to you. And by the way, if any sisters also want to share comments, feel free to do that. If you don't want to share them directly, you could also text it to this number. I think we're, in the meantime, perhaps you can read some of the comments that we're getting in. I think one of the scariest things that's happening today is something, there's a few things, where you could trace back most of what people do today to. Most of what people do today could be traced back to some philosophical values. Philosophy is really important, by the way. Philosophy is a really, really important subject. As people who live in the West, there are certain Western philosophical values that are affecting every aspect of our lives. How? By the food we eat, right? I know, this might be a little biased, but a lot of young people, they don't like the cultural food, right? French fries, burgers, pizza, so on and so forth. The food we eat, the things we watch, movies, shows, the people we interact with, have you guys ever heard of this term? I mentioned it in my last khutbah here. It's called social conditioning. You guys heard of the term before? You heard of the term? If you don't know what this term is, write it in your notes and go look it up later. Takyif ijtima'i, social conditioning. It teaches people how to perceive what makes them happy. What makes me happy, right? What makes me successful? What cultural expectations am I going to set in my life? And you know what? This word has ruined the lives of many people. Many marriages have been ruined because of social conditioning. I need to have a wedding like this. She needs to be from this balad or that balad. He needs to be from here or there. He needs to look like this. She needs to look like that. So on and so. Social conditioning, right? Anyway, this is one of the philosophical values, right? It's called individualism. Individualism basically teaches, and you have another one called consumerism. Consumerism is what makes me, want to wear, this brand, whatever, what's the most popular brand for guys of clothing? مثلا, what is it?
I'll just say Gucci.
Gucci, Nike, ولا مش عارف إيه, or having like a purse that's like Michael Kors or something else. But the point is here, that's consumerism. That we could have a whole discussion about what consumerism is. That's an important discussion. Consumerism. The iPhone 13 is out now, can't wait till the 14 one comes, and then I can't wait till the 15 one comes, and then the 16 one, مش عارف إيه. Consumerism. Individualism is what causes exactly what our dear brother mentioned, right? My career, me, myself, and I'm first. I have to think of me. I have to put myself before anyone else because no one else is going to put me first, right? This is how people are trained to think today. You do you. You got to think of you first and foremost, right? Even ahead of your own parents. I'm not going to let my parents be an obstacle in my life. I'm number one. I can't wait till I turn 18 because I'm going to leave the house. Khalas. That's it. I need to establish myself. I can't be under anyone else, right? And so on and so on. This idea of individualism is a very, very fatal one, right? Because it makes and you know what? It makes goodness in a person's life very scarce. Why was the Prophet ﷺ's life so special? Because it was a life in service of others, right? This value contradicts individualism. It contradicts it. When you live a life of service, you know what, I'm going to do good things for people just because it's nice to do good things, because it helps me. I'm going to be that good, that doorway to goodness for others because the Prophet ﷺ said, فَطُوبَى لِمَنْ جَعَلَ اللَّهُ مَفَاتِحَ الْخَيْرِ عَلَى يَدَيْهِ. Right? That's what I want to be, right? Individualism is, no, you need to build yourself up. Your career comes number one. all right? You need to be very frugal with your expenditure. This even capitalism feeds into this. You need to be very frugal and keep your money to yourself. Don't be too, don't be too kind and benevolent with others. Make sure that, if it's coming to you, yeah, sure, you could spend $100 or $1,000. If it comes to helping someone else, $100 is going to make me really upset, right? To help someone with $100, and so on and so forth. So, you know what? Who's the biggest victim? Well, how would you guys answer this question? Who's the biggest victim of individualism?
Themselves.
Huh? Themselves? Someone said the poor people. If you agree with the answer themselves, who's the biggest victim of an individualist lifestyle? If you think it's the person himself or herself, raise your hand. Man, alhamdulillah, many people agree. Wallahi, I agree.
I stole it from them, to be honest.
Wallahi, I agree. The biggest victim in a person's life when he lives a life of individualism is himself. He's the biggest victim. And that's why Allah says in the Quran, what? وَمَا تُنْفِقُوا مِنْ خَيْرٍ فَهُوَ لَكُمْ. Whenever you give for others, it's actually for yourself. Whenever you help someone, it's actually for yourself, right? So anyway, that's, I guess, to that, Jazakallah khair.
And so I think the point is there, if one is focused on their career, if one is too focused on this and that, it's a reminder again of this individualism that's could be driving, and it's a sign that one should not.
Yeah.
Should
Do we have something there? Because the doctor also wanted to share something.
There's something here, but there's something. This is a really. I don't think there's going to be much to comment on this because I think it's about really. It's someone just making a comment that I recently read that 25% of American Muslims are converts, and there's too much online information for them that could be overwhelming. So it's interesting to have forums and opportunities to connect with the masjid to support converts on their journey. And so in this demographic, we need to consider converts.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Agree. And I guess to that, I mean, the masjid is working on that. I'll just
Ya Rab.
that. Fair enough. Okay.
Ya Rab.
So I guess that was it.
دكتور تفضل.
Is two factors, excluded and included. Right? You don't want to exclude anybody.
Of course.
Any group, and you try to include everybody because everybody will contribute and will have some benefit from having it there.
Absolutely.
People also, you take them away from social distraction and you take them away from individualism, so they become part of the group and they learn how to interact with other people. And now the contribution will be different, depending on each one what's his background or what's under his belt or what he faced in life. So you take advantage of everybody.
Absolutely. I agree, wallahi. Jazakallah khair. The people on the far right here get to far left here get to hear what the doctor said. You guys heard?
So, no.
Can you summarize it?
Did you understand it better?
I understood.
Okay.
So basically what our beloved Dr. Abu Hamza was saying was what one of the things that's most fatal for any community is the idea of exclusion. And you never want to be exclusionary because various groups can benefit from each other, right? And each person brings what is unique to them to the table, whether they're older, younger, or somewhere in between. And I couldn't agree with you more. And that's why we have something like this, very open. Even they asked me on the flyer, you want to put an age demographic? You want to put like a certain age group on the flyer? I said, no, we don't want to put age group because we want to keep it open to everybody. Because you never know what benefit you could find from any age group. And you know what? That's actually, what our iman is really about. You know this? When you look at the Prophet ﷺ and the diverse age group he had around him, you find that there is a certain continuity meant to be about iman. You know what? And that's, you could say like tawrith al-iman, right? How does one generation inherit faith from another, right? That, you know, the Quran describes this, right? About the people of Iman. وَالَّذِينَ جَاءُوا مِن بَعْدِهِمْ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا اغْفِرْ لَنَا وَلِإِخْوَانِنَا الَّذِينَ سَبَقُونَا بِالْإِيمَانِ. Right? Those who came after them, what did they say? Oh Allah, forgive us and those who preceded us in faith. Right? Whereas you find the dynamic for hypocrisy is, and disbelief is, that there's a cutoff between the generations, right? كُلَّمَا دَخَلَتْ أُمَّةٌ لَعَنَتْ أُخْتَهَا. Every time one nation is cast into hellfire, it'll curse its sister nation. And you'll find that those who came later will say something, وَقَالَتْ أُخْرَاهُمْ لِأُولَاهُمْ رَبَّنَا هَؤُلَاءِ يَضَلُّونَ. Those who came later on, what did they say? They said, these are the ones who misguided us. Some people, some kids, that's how they, some children, some, sons and daughters, that's how they live their life. One of the worst things you could decide as a person to, live your life with this attitude. I'm like this because my father did this to me. I'm messed up the way I'm messed up because of my mother, right? Deflecting blame, right? Just, okay, it's because of the generation before me. They messed me up. They made me with no self-esteem. They made me insecure. They made me kada, 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 kada. La, la, la. That's not how a person should ever function. But anyway, the Prophet ﷺ, getting back to your point, take a look at this scene from the Prophet's life. Akhi Ahmad. I know this might be kind of disgusting to Western sensibilities, but what can we do? Arab culture, some of the things in Arab culture is very different than Western sensibilities. One time the Prophet ﷺ had a vessel, something to drink from. He was drinking from something, not a ship, a vessel, something to drink from, right? A jug, whatever. So it was of milk. He drank from it a little, and then he looked to his right, and he saw the youngest person in the gathering sitting right next to him. And of course for them, if they're in a gathering and we just have like one thing to drink from, they didn't have plastic cups and Dixie cups, the disposable thing. They didn't have this, right? They didn't have that, plentiful amount of resources. We have one thing to drink from, and we have a group of 10. We'll all drink from it one at a time. You take a sip, then you take a sip, then you take a sip. And, today, I'll tell you that's absolutely disgusting. And, how could you drink after someone else? And how could you eat after someone else? And so on and so forth. That's how sometimes we are. Anyway.
I wouldn't even call that Arab versus Western culture, though. I think that's just 7th century versus 21st century. If you probably went to any European country in the 7th century, they were probably drinking the same way, right?
Good point.
Sometimes that's just a way that they can sometimes frame,
I guess, the Arabs,
the Muslims, even the modern Muslims, as backwards or something like that, when it's also just like we're also learning from an ancient time. Just like when you guys learn from your ancient times, it's the same thing, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I guess the Arabs held on to it a little longer, though. Yeah. Today, some people, not everyone does this. Like, I think some of the second generation and non-Arabs, you'd see it as very bizarre. Like from some people from cultural backgrounds, like after a burial, after a janazah, they'll have food. And they won't have, I've seen this. I remember as I was younger, ICPC Patterson, when I saw this for the first time, I was like, what's going on here? I've never seen something like this before. Just a bunch of tables, no chairs, no spoons or forks, and then you just put a bunch of, sudurat manasif. Each table has a big plate of ruz and lahma. It's called mansaf, and rice and meat on a table. Then you have, each table have around it like 6, 7 guys, and each of them are doing something. Akhi Ahmed, I'm serious. So when I saw this, I was like a teenager, and I was like, what on earth are they doing with the rice? They're taking clumps of rice, and then doing this, and then doing this. And I'm like, what's going on here? So it seems like the Arabs held on to it for a little longer.
I see your point. Fair enough.
But I never got used to it. So, but anyway, going back to the hadith. What was the hadith? The Prophet found the youngest person right next to him. What did he say to him? أَتَأْذَنُ لِي أَنْ أُعْطِيَهُ الْأَشْيَاخ. Do you give me permission to give this to the elders? So then the young boy was like, no, I'm not going to let anyone drink after you before me. I want your saliva in my mouth. That's how he thought about the Prophet. He loved the Prophet. They loved the Prophet. So anyway, the point I was trying to get at, Doctor, was, you had the Prophet's gathering and you had a young boy sitting with them. That's why we want some of our younger children to be with us, so that they could be part of this type of mature discussion. We want some of our parents with us too, the older age, because maybe they could give a different perspective. And I think one of the worst things that could happen in a community, when the young people, the youth, they want to do their own little thing, right? Sometimes you find this in some communities where the youth are a little bit rebellious. We don't want to be with the rest of the people. We want to be alone. We want to do everything by ourselves, right? That could be very fatal, Allah understand.
Question.
Uh-huh. You're saying it's, you want to get married or something? Is that why you're asking that? So you're saying some people say you can't give the full right to marriage if you're still in school because you're going to be torn between the two? Something like this? Wait 1 week and we'll talk about marriage next week. I'm just kidding. I'm just joking with you. That's a really good question. It's a really good question, but because we got like 5 minutes left till Iqamah, we got to try to end, because that one could take, we could take like 10, 15 minutes just on that question. Is it dhulm? Is it oppression? It depends. Each situation is its own unique thing. If a person, and sometimes, by the way, this could ruin marriages. Like the person is like in a real tough, I don't want to get into the answer, like real tough education. Like you're talking about 100 hours a week they have to work because of the certain thing, and they can't give any rights to their wife or something like that. This of course. So this is a question that has a lot of different aspects to it. It could be dhulm. It could be oppression. Don't get married until you know the answer.
All right, so mashallah, we got a good 10 unique comments, questions. I realized we had not zoomed out of it for a little while, so I'm going to do my best to figure out how we could get the most out of this quickly, I guess.
Sure.
So first thing someone had said earlier, I think when you were talking, we had missed it, when we were talking about the isolation, he had wanted to share a hadith that he thought was important, that the Prophet ﷺ said, the believer who mixes with people and patiently bears their annoyance is better than the believer who does not mix with people or patiently bear their annoyance. Did you already say that? Is that what you're saying?
No, I didn't say that.
I thought that.
I was saying salam.
Okay, so I think it's just an important reminder too that the person who brought up a good point about the isolation versus nice isolation. It's better to go and mix and deal with it. There's a few questions on knowledge. And it started with Brother Yusuf brought up. They actually referenced Brother Yusuf. They keep asking about what ways to do now. So
we could leave it to Q&A. When maybe we'll have ask
Q&A
me
after.
No, ask me anything another day. Yeah.
Okay, so what do you want to do
with the questions?
With the rest, whatever the rest of the
if we have comments, share the comments.
Okay, so yeah, comments. I feel there are sufficient opportunities and resources in this community. The message is doing great with doors open and lots of beneficial programs. What we can do better, though, is improve our connections at the individual level, so that one can do outreach, individual dawah, to invite another member back to the masjid when he or she is missed at the masjid for a while or feeling spiritual low, getting them there.
I think that's a really good suggestion. Jazakallah khair. I think maybe one of the exercises we could do in this is maybe perhaps we can tell people to look to their left or to their right and get to know the person next to you if you don't already know them. How many of you are sitting next to someone you don't know much about? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. Some people are here. Yeah, there's a good, you know, and then I think the other ones is just because they chose to sit with their friends, you know. So, you know, I think there's a lot of people here that don't know each other. So, very good comment.
Okay. And at this one, I think it's important to, I mean, even though it's been touched on, I think they're trying to add a different angle to it. They say, I feel that this age group demographic is slowly losing touch with the masjid because after our childhood, we become old and more focused on this dunya so we can survive in it and not drown in debt, like for studying, for school, and paying bills. So I think the important part is they brought up here the drowning in debt part and trying to communicate here that there's a necessity. We're not being part from the masjid because of we're being selfish. It's because that we have. I feel like that's what they're trying to convey here. They're trying to say it's because.
Yeah, you know, I think that's a really good point. I think maybe we could have a mini series one day about philosophical values that are really impacting the way people look at things. You know, we could have one day about capitalism, one day about individualism, one day about consumerism, and then we could find a few other isms that are affecting people. Huh? Fascism? There you go. Narcissism? Yeah. Any other comments before we close?
I think the rest are questions.
All right, so we'll leave the questions to another. You know, I want, before it's time for Iqamah, and I could see the people who came for Isha, they're like on their toes, like, okay, come on, when's he going to finish? We're going to stay here till 11 o'clock or what? We're finishing. لا تخف ولا تحزن.
All right, two more quick comments. I don't think it's going to take long. One is that I would like to learn. I
Brothers are going to get mad at you.
It's more, I want them to feel like they're not typing for nothing, right? Learn more. One thing that they want to learn more about philosophy and psychology in Islam, and another one saying they'd want to see it open up a podcast, making it convenient for many people all around.
By the way, we already have a podcast. If you guys don't know, we have a podcast. It's called The Meeting Point. It's with Shaykh Yasser and myself and Ustad Zaid. You could actually find it on the podcast platforms. We don't have all the episodes on there yet. There's a lot of episodes we don't have, but hopefully we'll get them uploaded soon and updated, inshallah. We're concluding right now, but before we conclude, where's the QR code? Where is it? The papers with the QR code? Do you know where they are, Na'il? Anyone have them? You have the papers? No, I don't need them. I don't need them. There's a QR code there. What is it for? It's for basically people. It's a WhatsApp group for this program, the Friday Forum. Anyone who wants to be part of it, all you got to do is scan the QR code and then you could join the WhatsApp group. What are we going to use the WhatsApp group for? Announcements. Sometimes we'll ask you for ideas for topics. We'll take some of your feedback. We'll do some polling sometimes on the WhatsApp group for different things we're considering doing. So if you plan to come to this program regularly, consider scanning the QR code and join the WhatsApp group so you could get the latest every time on the Friday Forum. Jazakumullah khair for being with us today. Jazakallah khair, Akhi Ahmed, for, I always like it with your comments and your questions. It really helps with a lot. So, Jazakumullah khair, subhanakallah wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk, bismillahir rahmanir rahim. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير. السلام